Jake lived on the edge of the colony, in a small cabin surrounded by rocky hills and a few patches of hardy vegetation that struggled to grow under the weak, artificial sunlight. Life here was quiet, lonely, and sometimes harsh. He had chosen this place to escape the crowded cities, to live with fewer people and more peace. But even in this quiet life, Jake had a heart for the small and forgotten. Every evening, after finishing his own meal, he would set aside leftovers for the stray animals that wandered near his cabin. Some were native to the colony, small, furry creatures that reminded him of Earth animals. Others were tiny alien beasts that looked like glowing insects with legs too many to count. He never minded. Feeding them made him feel connected to the world, even if the world was small. One evening, as the artificial sun dipped low and the sky turned a muted shade of orange, Jake plated his leftover scraps of vegetables, some roasted protein and soft bread he had baked himself. He carried the plate outside and placed it near the small hill where the strays often waited. A few of them emerged from hiding, sniffing cautiously. Their eyes reflected the faint sunlight, and a low hum of appreciation passed between them. Jake smiled, turning to head back to his cabin, when he noticed something unusual. The air near the edge of his small garden shimmered, like heat waves rising from a hot stone. But it was moving oddly, twisting and bending. Jake froze. His heart pounded. He had lived on this colony for years and had seen strange things, but this was unlike anything before. Slowly, the shimmer took form, and 3 figures appeared. At first, they were blurry, their shapes flickering as if reality itself could not hold them properly. As they stepped closer, Jake could make out more details. The first girl had skin like polished crystal, translucent and softly glowing from within. Her eyes were pale and reflective, and every movement she made left a faint trail of light. The second had eyes that seemed to change color depending on her mood, shifting from soft green to deep violet as she looked around, cautious but curious. The third had hair that glowed like strands of starlight, twisting and floating as though underwater, giving her an ethereal, almost unreal appearance. They were humanoid in shape, but clearly not human. And yet there was something familiar in their gestures. Something that made Jake's instincts tell him they were not dangerous. He stepped back instinctively, unsure how to react. They did not attack or make threatening moves. Instead, they paused, looking at him with what seemed like confusion and hunger. Their stomachs rumbled softly, though in a strange musical tone that made Jake's skin tingle. It was clear they were hungry. Jake's fear melted slightly into curiosity and sympathy. He had always believed in helping those in need, and these girls were clearly in need. He raised his hands in a peaceful gesture and spoke softly. "It's okay. You can. Eat." He gestured toward the plate of leftovers he had left for the animals. For a moment, nothing happened. The girls exchanged glances, tilting their heads as if trying to understand. Then, slowly, they approached the plate. The crystalline-skinned girl reached out delicately, touching the food with a finger that left a faint sparkle on the bread. She tasted it cautiously, her eyes widening in surprise. The second girl followed, nibbling at a piece of roasted protein, while the third watched them carefully, almost shyly, before taking a small bite herself. Jake couldn't help but laugh quietly. The scene was strange, yes, but also endearing. He had expected animals, not alien beings, yet here they were, sharing a meal that he had intended for the colony's smallest creatures. They seemed fascinated by everything: the texture of the bread, smell of the protein, even the way he drank water from a cup. Every movement was met with a small sound or gesture, like applause or approval, that he could not understand but somehow felt good about. After they ate, Jake offered them more food. They hesitated at first, clearly unsure whether to trust him completely, but hunger won over caution. He set down a larger tray containing fruit and some baked goods. The girls gathered around, eating, and occasionally exchanging glances that suggested amusement or pleasure. They were learning quickly, adjusting to something entirely new. Jake watched them with wonder. Night fell. The colony's artificial lights flickered on, casting long shadows. Jake knew he could not leave them outside, exposed to potential dangers. He approached carefully and said, "You can stay inside, at least for the night. I have extra blankets." One of the girls, the one with starlight hair, tilted her head and made a soft melodic hum. It sounded like a question, but Jake understood it as agreement. Slowly, they followed him inside. The cabin was small, but safe. He guided them to the corner where he had laid out some blankets, explaining as simply as he could in words and gestures that this was a place to rest. They mimicked him, carefully handling the blankets and arranging themselves in a way that seemed both practical and graceful. Their movements fascinated Jake. Every gesture was precise, almost like a dance, and he realized that despite their otherworldly appearance, they were intelligent and aware. As the night deepened, Jake sat nearby, unsure how to proceed. He did not speak to them much, only offering occasional words or a gentle smile. They seemed comfortable with his presence, though, resting quietly. The first girl occasionally looked at him with her glowing eyes, as if studying him, while the second curled her fingers around a corner of a blanket, making small, soft hums. The third simply watched, her glowing hair creating faint trails in the dim light. In those quiet hours, Jake realized something profound. Here were beings from another world, entirely alien, yet vulnerable and in need of kindness. He had never thought of himself as a hero, or even particularly brave, but offering simple human generosity had brought them to his cabin. And perhaps for the first time, they had experienced safety and warmth. The hours passed slowly. Jake found himself thinking about how he would help them in the days to come. They would need food, protection, and guidance. They might have a home to return to, or perhaps they were alone, lost in this human-controlled colony. The uncertainty weighed on him, but he also felt a quiet excitement. Life had suddenly become larger, stranger, and infinitely more interesting. Eventually, the girls fell asleep, one by one, in the blankets he had laid out. Their breathing was soft, almost musical, and the glow from their skin, eyes, and hair filled the room with gentle light. Jake sat in a chair nearby, watching them, feeling an unexpected sense of responsibility and connection. He had left his leftovers for animals, and in return, he had found companions from the stars. Sleep came slowly to him that night. He thought of what the morning would bring, how to feed them, how to help them, and perhaps how to communicate with them more fully. But in that quiet cabin, surrounded by alien light and gentle hums, Jake felt something he had not felt in a long time: hope. Hope that humans, even small and ordinary ones like him, could reach across worlds, touch lives, and make a difference. And as the colony's artificial night continued, he realized that the universe was far bigger and stranger than he had ever imagined, and that maybe, just maybe, he was ready to meet it head-on. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the cabin's small windows, casting a gentle glow on the three alien girls who were still asleep in the blankets. Jake watched them quietly, careful not to wake them. Their light had dimmed during the night, but they still glowed faintly, like soft stars resting in the corner of his cabin. He smiled, feeling a mixture of amazement and responsibility. These girls were not only strangers from another world, they were entirely dependent on him for now, and he intended to care for them as best he could. He moved quietly to the kitchen area and began preparing a fresh meal. He cut vegetables and roasted more protein, making sure to set aside a small portion for the girls. As he worked, he thought about how different their needs might be. They had eaten his leftovers yesterday without complaint, but he wondered if their nutrition needs were the same as humans, or if their bodies required something he did not know about. He hoped they could survive on simple food for now. When the girls began to stir, Jake approached gently. "Good morning," he said softly. They looked at him, blinking their glowing eyes as if adjusting to both the light and his voice. The crystalline-skinned girl tilted her head and made a melodic sound, something between a hum and a chirp, which Jake took to mean greeting. He smiled and offered them the fresh food. They approached cautiously, touching the plates and sniffing the food. Then, slowly, they began eating again, this time more eagerly than before. Jake watched, fascinated, as they learned quickly how to handle utensils. Even though some of their movements were delicate and precise in ways humans could not replicate, he realized they were intelligent capable of understanding patterns, and curious about human behavior. After the meal, Jake decided to help them become more comfortable in the cabin. He led them to the small common area and demonstrated how to sit, how to handle cups of water, and how to use simple objects like blankets and chairs. The girls watched him closely, imitating his movements with surprising accuracy. Occasionally, one would make a soft sound that seemed like laughter or approval. Jake felt a strange warmth in his chest. Despite their alien nature, there was a shared understanding forming, a bridge between human and extraterrestrial. As the day progressed, Jake realized that the girls were more than just hungry or lost. They were curious and playful, eager to explore and understand their new environment. They inspected every corner of his cabin, touching walls, studying lights, and experimenting with objects. Their curiosity was not reckless. It was careful, measured, and intelligent. Jake began to teach them small things about human life: how to make tea, how to arrange blankets, even how to safely use his small heater without getting burned. Each lesson was met with fascination and sometimes quiet excitement, their glowing bodies flickering slightly with emotion. Around midday, Jake stepped outside to gather some supplies from a nearby crate. As he returned, he noticed that the girls had begun experimenting with one another, gently exploring their abilities. The girl with starlight hair was hovering slightly above the ground, testing her control over gravity. The crystalline-skinned girl reflected sunlight and patterns on the walls, creating small rainbows, while the color-changing-eyed girl hummed softly, producing vibrations that made small objects shift slightly. Jake was amazed. They were learning quickly, adapting not just to their surroundings, but to human life in a way that suggested remarkable intelligence. But as he marveled at them, a sudden alert on his device made him freeze. A local security channel was reporting unidentified alien signals near the colony's edge. Jake realized that the girls' presence might not go unnoticed for long. If patrols discovered them, they could be taken away, questioned, or worse. The thought of losing them made his chest tighten. He knew he had to act carefully to protect them. He gathered the girls inside and, using gestures, tried to communicate the need for caution. They seemed to understand immediately. The crystalline-skinned girl mimicked his gestures, pointing to herself, and then to him, a sign that she grasped his intention to keep them safe. The starlight-haired girl hummed in agreement, while the color-changing-eyed girl looked at him with a steady gaze that seemed to convey trust. Jake felt a rush of relief. Despite the language barrier, trust had formed. It's a fragile but real bond between human and alien. For the next few hours, Jake focused on teaching them practical skills for survival within the colony. He showed them how to move quietly, how to avoid attracting attention, and how to communicate with gestures and simple sounds. The girls adapted rapidly, their natural intelligence and curiosity allowing them to absorb the lessons faster than Jake could have imagined. He even taught them a few human words, though their alien vocal cords made the pronunciation unique, yet oddly charming. As evening approached, Jake decided to take a risk. He led them outside to a small clearing near his cabin, allowing them to see the open sky and the stars. The girls were mesmerized, their glowing bodies reflecting the light from distant suns. They moved carefully, almost floating, their eyes wide with wonder. Jake realized that this moment was important. It was not just about survival, it was about connection. By showing them beauty and freedom, he was helping them feel human emotions, awe, curiosity, and joy. Suddenly, one of the girls pointed toward the sky with a trembling hand. Jake followed her gaze and saw a distant flash of light, like a patrol ship scanning the area. Panic surged through him. If they were discovered now, the girls could be captured. He quickly motioned for them to return to the cabin. They followed without question, moving swiftly and quietly, their previous playfulness replaced by tense focus. Back inside, Jake locked the door and double-checked the windows. He realized that protecting them would require constant vigilance, but he also knew that running or hiding was not enough. He needed a plan, a way to keep them safe while integrating them into life on the colony without drawing unwanted attention. Over the next few days, Jake and the girls settled into a routine. He continued teaching them human habits while also learning from them. Their alien abilities, subtle but powerful, helped improve his daily life. The starlight-haired girl could adjust the gravity slightly to help carry heavy objects. The crystalline-skinned girl could reflect light to illuminate dark areas without electricity. And the color-changing eyed girl could sense vibrations, warning them of approaching footsteps or vehicles. Jake marveled at how much humans could gain from cooperation with intelligent aliens. Despite the need for caution, there were moments of laughter and joy. The girls discovered humor in human objects, like spoons, cups, and small trinkets. They imitated Jake's gestures, sometimes exaggerating them in ways that made him laugh out loud. Slowly, the cabin felt less like a small shelter and more like a home. The girl's presence transformed his lonely life into something vibrant and alive. One evening, as they sat together around a small table, Jake reflected on everything that had happened. A week ago, he had simply left leftovers for stray animals. Now, he had 3 alien girls living with him, teaching him as much as he taught them. He realized that kindness, patience, and curiosity had opened a door to a universe far larger than he had ever imagined. The girls, in their own ways, seemed to understand this as well. The crystalline-skinned girl reached out and touched his hand gently, a gesture of trust and gratitude. The starlight-haired girl hummed a soft melody that filled the room with warmth, while the color-changing eyed girl's gaze held a quiet, steady promise of loyalty. Jake felt a deep connection, not just to them, but to the universe itself, a universe where humans, through simple acts of kindness, could form bonds that spanned worlds. As night fell, Jake realized that life would never be the same. He had found companions, friends, and allies in the most unexpected way. The girls were no longer strangers. They were part of his life, part of his family. And in that quiet cabin, surrounded by glowing light and gentle hums, Jake knew that he had discovered something extraordinary: the power of compassion, curiosity, and humanity itself. The future was uncertain, and challenges would come, but Jake no longer felt alone. He had opened his heart to beings from the stars, and in return, they had opened theirs to him. Together, they would face whatever the universe had in store, and perhaps they would show that humans, small, ordinary humans, could be extraordinary in ways the galaxy had never imagined. And as he watched the 3 girls settle for the night, their glow dimming slightly in restful sleep, Jake felt a quiet, unshakable truth: kindness could reach across the stars, and the universe, vast and unknowable, had room for humans to shine.